Hi guys. Today I had the absolute privilege and pleasure of sitting down with Fabiana Fedeli, the Chief Investment Officer of Equities, Multi-Asset and Sustainability at M&G Investments. We sat down, we talked about her life, her career journey, growing up in Italy to studying in Japan, living and working in New York, the UK and across Asia. It was an absolute pleasure and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Cheers. Fabiana, thank you for coming to my home today. How are you?
Thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure. I'm very well. So happy to be here.
It's fantastic to see you. So when did you arrive in Singapore?
I arrived last night.
Okay, you're doing well. And then you've off the jet lag and you've got a full schedule for the rest of the week?
I'm definitely keeping busy and out of trouble.
Okay, good. Well, that's not easy. Now, for my audience members and the few that don't know you, can you be kind enough just to give a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what you're doing at the moment with M&G?
Sure. So I work at M&G, which is a company that is listed on the stock exchange in the United Kingdom. I am the CIO, the Chief Investment Officer for Equities, Multi-Asset and Sustainability. I have a team of around 150 colleagues. My team manages about $75 billion, and we manage it across all asset classes, multi-asset, equities, and across the globe.
Wow. So I asked you this on the phone, but you know everyone's name. Is that easy, or do you have to sit down and find a way to memorize everyone's name?
It's actually easy, but because I make a point of talking to everyone. So anyone who joins the team, no matter how senior or how junior they are, I try to meet with them, even maybe have just a short conversation if, at one point I don't have time, but really try to establish a rapport.
I'm really curious, how did you end up going to Japan?
Well, being a poor student helped. At one point I wanted to be an academic, and in order to progress, the one way at an Italian university was to get your degrees outside of Italy. And I had the equivalent of a master's degree from my university, but I had to take a PhD somewhere else. And the only place that would give me not only tuition coverage, but also pocket money was Japan.
Amazing.
I didn't really speak the language. I could only do the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But I met this amazing professor from a Japanese university. He actually helped me during my time there. I won a scholarship from the Ministry of Education. And I have to say, I had to repeat my master's. That was the rule. I had to learn Japanese. But eventually, when I finished my master's, I felt, maybe I don't want to go for academic career. Maybe I want to do something different.
Yeah.
And that's how I joined the industry, and I started in Japan.
It's so interesting because my wife had to redo her master's. When we moved to the US, she went to Yale, and then she pursued her PhD. And it's like, when you have to resit a whole year, it's cumbersome, right? But what she shared with me, it took more time to do the application for a PhD than to actually sit the master's in some ways, which is crazy. Now, one of the things that we both have in common, we are from humble backgrounds. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious how that really shaped your destiny and your view on things. Because I think if you come from a humble background, it gives us an edge and a different worldly view on things.
My goodness, I feel blessed. I feel blessed for everything I experience, everything I have, everything I'm able to do. Because I've seen what it means not to be able to do certain things, not to be able to afford them.
Yeah.
So, working hard for me is it's fine. It's what you need to do to make sure that you can have a nice life and you can afford a nice life to those you love. I just feel blessed every day.
Tell me the story about ice cream.
You remember that?
I do.
So in Italy, when you start what they call a profession, which is some kind of manual work, you have to have what they call a work booklet. I don't know if you still have to. I've left Italy many years ago, but at the time was the case. And I had mine, and mine to this date says that my profession is to be an ice cream maker. And that's because as we didn't have much money when I was growing up, I started working when I was 15. I worked at an ice cream store, and I learned how to make ice creams, and obviously that was my profession, and I'm very proud of it.
And you still like a nice gelato? You must.
I still like a nice gelato. I'm extremely, extremely picky because
sure.
I know exactly how that is made.
Yeah, exactly.
But I wouldn't be able to make one right now anymore.
Okay, it's probably better for your waistline, right?
Possibly.
So share with us our journey. So after that, after you finished in Japan, what was next? How did your career begin?
So something that has always driven me has been a great degree of curiosity and a little bit also naivety, just, the classic, well, what can go wrong? Let's just try it out.
Yeah.
And so I was in Japan, and I have to admit, I was working at a great company. It was a foreign company. And actually, I was progressing well in my career as a stock market analyst. But Japan wasn't the easiest place for a woman. And, I had three things that made my life more difficult in Japan. I was a woman, I was a foreigner, and I was young. And so sometimes, having to sit down with company management, you really almost felt that they were questioning you first to see if you were good at what you were doing before they would trust you. And the truth is, in the end, they would trust me, and I have some amazing relationships that I still keep to this day. But, I wanted to try something that was a little bit easier, and my company offered me a position in New York.
Wow. So tell us about that. I mean, that was, had you ever been to New York at that stage?
I had been only once when I was actually just starting university. A friend of mine had won a prize, and that was a trip to New York. And so I bought his ticket for a nominal amount, and
Wow.
I managed to go to New York. and I found that actually I wasn't too, enamored with it because,
first.
it's like big buildings. And,
Yeah.
But working in New York, that was absolutely fantastic.
On another level.
Yes. And, you and I talked about this earlier. It is a very meritocratic society.
Yeah.
Possibly if you have a very privileged background, a lot of doors will open for you. But if you don't have the privileged background, but you really show that you're good at what you do, then other doors will open. And I always like that of the States.
Yeah, I find it interesting because having, like you, I've lived in different parts of the world. So I've always found in Asia, it's possible to get through to a CEO, for example, maybe within 3 calls. And in the US, it was 7 calls. But when you get in the room, if you can prove that you can deliver, you get to stay in the room. You get a seat at the table. But I also, it's interesting because a lot of the young people I speak to today, maybe you can speak to this, always feel that if you're young, you don't have a voice. And I think it shouldn't deter people from trying. Do you know what I mean? And if you're lucky, you'll come across people along the way that see some potential and talent and will nurture that. But it shouldn't let people, hold them back.
Absolutely. Always voice your opinions. Do it in a respectful way.
Yeah.
But someone will listen. And as long as you have a good argument,
Yes.
and as long as your thought is well built, you do have a chance.
But the thing is, I'm married to a lawyer and an academic. And we've been together 21 years, like I was telling you, and I haven't won any arguments yet, even if they're well constructed. So how long were you in the US then?
Well, the U.S. is still my home, so I've spent a lot of my time there. Started working there in New York since 2000.
Okay, so you saw all the changes. Wow.
I saw all the changes, some for the best, some for the worst, but it's still one of those places that, it's absolutely thriving and thrilling.
I'm like you. When I first went, I wasn't enamored with it, and then progressively over time, and then, like, for example, if you're like, I love theatre, so if you're there, you'll get to see many different things. If you like museums, and you can always have a good night out in New York, good food, In terms of what shaped your determination growing up, was it, how you saw your mum, having to struggle? So then why I'm curious is, when you start working in a place like New York, they always say you need sharp elbows, right? You've got to be tough to survive. But, how did your determination get shaped at an early age?
Well, definitely seeing my mom having so many difficulties did shape my determination. I just didn't want to have the same type of life.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I could afford certain things. I didn't want richness,
Yeah.
but I just wanted comfort so that I could do the things that I was interested in.
Yes.
One good thing that my mother, she did many good things, but one that was particularly, if you want, critical in shaping my life afterwards was to have me travel from a very young age. We hardly had any money. She was terrible at financial decisions. We would probably finish the money for food like 3/4 of the month in. So it was, and that's why I started working when I was quite young. But if she had a little bit of savings, she would take me travel. And so from a very early age, I still remember, I was 8 years old when I went to Egypt, 10 when I went to Turkey, 12 when I went to Russia, and so on. And I think that really helped over time, first and foremost because I've seen a lot of poverty while I was traveling. And that for me was also, was the understanding that there's always someone, by the way, who needs more than you do.
Yeah, no, it's a big thing. Now, congratulations, because back in 2022, you were named one of the top 100 most influential women in finance.
And also yesterday.
And yesterday. Tell us, what happened? Congrats. I didn't read that.
No, that's okay. It's a list of the top 100 women in finance from a European publication.
Amazing.
And,
so how does that make you feel, in terms of being a global leader and as a lady, at the forefront of things? Does it make you think, okay, I need to be presenting in this kind of format and paving the way?
It does make you feel a great degree of responsibility. When we talk about diversity, I don't only think about gender. I think about so many different types of diversity. I also think about social background as diversity. I think about different cultural backgrounds as diversity. And every kind of diversity out there. It is so important to give a voice to everyone and let everyone know what you were saying earlier about young people. Let everyone know that they do have a voice.
Yeah.
So yes, I feel responsible. I feel like I'm out there and I have a personal duty to help young, diverse professionals to make their mark.
What I find very interesting, I had a conversation this morning, this young fellow who's just moved to the US, he's working in the Hamptons as a real estate guy. And what was interesting is he was recommended to me as an intern. Mm-hmm. And this chap that recommended him, I said, well, do you vouch for him? Do you know him? He said, yeah. I said, well, I don't need to interview him. Just tell him to turn up tomorrow. And we've stayed in close contact. He's 27 now, so he's just moved there. And I saw it on LinkedIn, and I said, congratulations. And he gave me a call to say thanks. And it was very touching because he said, look, those few words of encouragement, how I helped him out, and I stayed in contact with him. And he was kind of asking, well, why did you do that? And I just said, look, I wasn't given many opportunities, right, until I was a bit older. And I think if you have someone who's in your corner who believes in you, it can go a long way.
Yep.
And I always subscribe to a rising tide raises all ships. So you're going to come across some negative people along the way, but I'm an optimist, and I know you are. And you've talked about being an optimist who plans for the worst. Speak to me about that in your profession. How does that work?
Well, I was an analyst first and then a portfolio manager for many years. I used to manage emerging market equities and before that, Asia equities. And, as a portfolio manager, you obviously make your calls, you buy stocks, but you have to always think about what could go wrong. So, this company, I like it, it's fantastic, but what could derail the investment case? And that's something that is really important for you to do, and that will determine then how you shape your portfolio, how you risk adjust it, how you balance certain positions versus others. So that I've really learned throughout my portfolio management career. And then more recently, as I moved from managing portfolios to managing large teams of colleagues, then you realize that, one of the biggest risks, for example, is what happens if you lose a key person, a key man or woman. Well, you know what? You have to build a team so that you can minimize that risk. You always have some fantastic achievers, but the whole team has to literally create and surround that product so that if one of those colleagues leaves, then you still have a strong team around that.
Yeah.
And that's a bit of that. You're always optimistic. You know you will do very well. You really believe in it. You believe in the team. But just in case, make sure you prepare everything.
You need that foresight. I think the biggest thing in our space that I've realized, and it's through no fault of their own, but most CEOs, I get the feeling that they're not being measured annually anymore. It feels like it's quarterly, even monthly. And I feel for them because, if you look at which role is the greatest revolving door, arguably it's that one. And it's very difficult to balance, the immediate AUM and revenue that the business is managing and growing a business that's sustainable 5 years from now. It's like running a marathon and a sprint at the same time. It's not easy.
It's not easy, but you also understand where that comes from. It comes from our clients. So when I talk to many of my clients, years ago they had the luxury to say, it's okay if you perform over 3 years and maybe not over one. But now they are actually talking to their own investment committees. They're under much bigger scrutiny than they used to.
Yeah.
And so they will then revert that scrutiny towards us and understand why. So I can't guarantee to my clients, and I'm very transparent, my teams are very transparent. I can't guarantee that I will outperform every quarter because actually that doesn't necessarily put you in the best position to outperforming for the longer term. But that we're going to outperform for 3 years and it's fine, just ignore the bad year, that's not acceptable anymore. You have to make an effort on an annual basis to outperform. And also you have to make a bigger effort than you ever did in minimizing the drawdowns because there is not the same willingness to accept a minus 20% if you're going to do then plus 100 as they used to be in the past. They would rather do a minus 2 and maybe a plus 20, but feel that they can sleep better at night. At least most of clients are like that.
How do you manage, so many people in different locations in terms of the cultural differences? I think it's probably easier now because we live in a largely global, environment. But how do you balance the nuances?
Well, I do think that having traveled so much from a younger age really helps. You learn that we actually all have very similar values, if not the same values. But we interpret them in different ways. And you have to be respectful of that. You have to understand where everyone comes from. And you actually can help them to integrate better globally across the world with all your other teams. And I'm particularly proud of my team now because it has really become a very integrated team. We have these chat rooms, by expertise, and you'll see colleagues from all over the world like asking each other questions. Can you speak to this company to check on this? Or have you already looked at this particular technology before? Have you done? And it's just fantastic. And everybody kind of
They come together.
Comes together. But everybody also respects each other's differences, right? You have different holidays. You have different ways of thinking about family. And it's okay. It actually makes your world and your work a more interesting place.
I think when you've lived and traveled around the world like you have, you become a global citizen. You end up, you adapt, you enjoy, and it's universal. Now, you're a self-confessed data junkie.
I am.
So how do you operate at work when you're looking at data in your team?
So I never only listen. I want to see. So I want to see numbers. I want to understand what is happening behind the numbers. Just talk for me is not enough. I really have to grasp the, what is behind it. And so, for example, I'm in pretty much all the risk meetings of my strategies, and I will sit there and I just love looking at all the numbers of the risk profiles and just kind of asking questions, and I think that makes you also a better portfolio manager for the investment teams, and it gives me just a better understanding and also longer term memory, because I find that when I see the numbers,
Yeah.
I remember things so much better.
It's funny that, isn't it? Sometimes I wonder because I'm a big sports fan, and it's funny, like some numbers are arbitrary and you think, how do you remember them? And I was teaching my kids, look, there are many different ways. And when you learn a cell phone number, you break it up into four digits. But I think we're all shaped by what we do. And what I've learned is that I can tag numbers to people, to faces, to companies, so you must be doing that on a massive level. With your love for the markets, how do you remain fresh, having been in the business for over 2 decades? How do you remain passionate about the markets?
Markets are my hobby. I mean, I literally, I'm going to sound so cheesy now. I really love what I do.
Yeah.
Some of my best Sundays will be sitting on the couch reading on my laptop, and my husband will come and look at me and go like, "Oh, come on, again? Seriously? Get a life." And I just love it. That and sports. The one thing that I like about markets is that they always surprise you. I mean, think about, the Fed has just recently cut by 50 basis points, but literally treasuries didn't move, the short end didn't move, the long end sold off. You wouldn't have thought that. But if you thought about it in the context of what was happening, that expectations were already pretty much baked into what had happened with fixed income markets, and the fact that markets were concerned about potentially a slowdown of the economy, then you could understand why the market had behaved in a different way from how possibly you would have thought it would react. And I like that. Markets always keep you on your toes.
They do. Do you feel pressure being the CIO that you've got to have this crystal ball, which doesn't really exist? I'm sure you must feel some pressure.
Well, the good thing is that I can make a disclaimer, and I can always start with, I don't have a crystal ball. but that's the other thing, we need to be humble, and we need to make sure that we prepare our portfolios for different types of outcomes. You still might have your conviction that one outcome is more likely than the other, but you can't put all your eggs in one basket, because at least for me, I've been in markets for 25 years now. Things can change, and rapidly, and they can completely change the outcome of what you were so convinced about.
Do you feel, because one of the things that I find a little bit annoying in my job on the recruitment side is I feel that there's an element of ageism now. And I've always felt, look, in the markets, if someone's been through two or three recessions, they are war-proven. They understand how things are, and they're less reactive. And I think that goes a long way. So conversely, talking about people that are younger, I just think in business and in industry, if you've seen many different things, you won't react in the same way. You will not be so impetuous. Do you feel now when there are global changes and shifts that you take a step back, take a deep breath, and analyze things a little bit more patiently?
Definitely. I do believe that having been through a few crises does help. Actually, I have an anecdote on this. When 2008 came, the end of 2007, and it looked like, things were not quite going the way we thought they should have gone. I still remember I was drawing on my past experience. So I was an internet analyst in 2000. First in Japan and then in the US. And I saw many of my stocks come down by 50%, 60%. Some of them, after a few months, didn't even exist anymore. So when 2008 came, I remember speaking to my colleague, and there was a first bout of decline in the market, and he said, "Well, it can't get worse." And I was like, "No, I've seen this before. It can get worse."
Yes.
And in fact, it did. And by the way, markets have a way of recuperating, and in the end, we know where we are now. But I do think that being through a few crises just makes you more aware of
100%.
of what the downside, the potential downside can be. But it also makes you more aware not to react too quickly and without really being thoughtful, because think 2021, the market can totally turn around, right?
Yes.
And then where are you going to find yourself if you're out of the market?
I'm really curious, given how broad your remit is, CIO, multi-asset, sustainability, how do you balance wearing so many different hats?
I actually enjoy it. I enjoy the diversity of it. And I also think that each of these hats makes me better at the others. So, having a sustainability research team under my remit makes me understand so many things that I think ultimately make me a better investor, and hopefully I can pass that on to my teams. Being also the CEO of multi-asset makes me look at a broader cohort of markets, both on the fixed income side and on the equities side, and I can then discuss that with my equities teams, which are more, if you want to focus on their respective investment universes. So, I think it helps, and it's fun.
What I find interesting is when I speak to a lot of people that, let's just say 35, 40, 45 even, what are your career aspirations? I ask people. And quite often, people don't know, or they're afraid to say. So I'll ask, do you want to become the CEO? Do you want to become the CIO? Becoming the CIO is something that very few people, I think, will put their hand up and say they want to become. When did you think it was a possibility, and when were you eyeing that as a potential move for you?
I don't think I ever really thought about becoming a CIO. It just happened. I first became, at my previous company, head of a team, and then there were some other teams around us, and I just kind of felt that we could create, but we were all working in silos, and I felt we could create a more consistent way of investing, sharing a lot more ideas. And so I went to my CIO at the time, and I asked, well, would you mind if I start working on this? And he said no. And then as this progressed, and we actually became really a one team with all our different specializations, where we were making each other stronger, then he gave me the reporting lines of those teams. And then, fast forward to now, I'm still doing the same thing at a different company, but that's still the principle, right? You're creating a franchise. You're allowing your people to work and invest in a stronger environment. An environment can really support them and ultimately their clients.
Yeah. Now, when you're looking at growing a business and balancing out with risk, and I know your husband's from the risk side.
Yes.
How do you do that? Because, pushing forward but playing safe is not easy,
It is not. It's all about managing your risks, right? It's never about not taking risks, because in our job, that's what clients are asking us to do, is to take risks, but they have to be considered, they have to be calculated, and you have to be able to manage them. So, we were talking earlier about the fact that I'm in the vast majority of the risk meetings of my teams. That, for me, is important. I think there is the understanding that, you can mitigate certain risks and you should mitigate other risks, and you have to build your investment roster in a way that those risks are balanced.
Yeah.
But you still have to take those risks, because that's what generates the alpha.
When you look at your responsibility in terms of sustainability and ESG, do you feel that most organizations are doing it because they feel they have to be doing it, as opposed to genuinely it's heartfelt and they believe this is the future?
That's such an important topic. Do you remember the Gartner hype cycle
Yes.
about technology, new technological innovation? When there is the peak of inflated expectations, then you have these basically disillusionment, and then eventually you have the slope of enlightenment. I think the same has happened also to ESG and to expectations for the industry and from clients on ESG. You know, there was a bit of a hype. There was a lot of marketing around it. And we have had that trough of disillusionment coming in because, frankly, a lot of the strategies that were built on sustainability did not perform as they should have performed. But that doesn't mean that sustainability is not important. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't embed it in your investment process.
For sure.
It's just that sustainability doesn't only mean investing in one type of company. It's literally being able to weave it into every investment idea you have.
Yeah. When you look at the future in terms of financial trends, I want to get your sense of these things will go boom or bust in the next 5 years. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, if you don't mind. Sustainable investing.
A boom, but we will not call it sustainable investing anymore. It will simply become investing because it will become so embedded in what we do and how we invest that everything will be sustainable.
Very interesting. What about AI-driven investment decisions?
Boom, but we will almost forget about it because it will be so pervasive in everything we do.
Yeah.
It will be in healthcare innovation. It will be in how we manufacture products. It will be in our daily lives. I'm a big believer in artificial intelligence.
It is so interesting to see how in the short time it's been around, it's a game changer, right, on a different level. It's a bit scary. It's exciting. Passive versus active investing.
I believe active ETFs will take a big chunk of market away from passive investing. Because I think we have the issue the wrong way around. It's not that passive investing became popular because it's passive. It became popular because they were very easy to access products, ETFs, that were based on these passive strategies. And that has democratized the world of investing, which is great. So many people could invest.
Yeah.
But if we start seeing real active ETFs, I'm not talking about semi-active or semi-passive strategies, because those are already available, and they're fine, by the way. They're totally fine. But actual active strategies being packaged into ETFs and so being more accessible to the market, I think that line between passive and active will become ever so blurred.
So interesting. Do you, if you were talking to young professionals that are coming up and, in the future wanted to really pursue a career in investment and financial services, what books or podcasts would you suggest that they watch or listen to?
There's one book that I believe taught me a lot, and that is Thinking Fast and Slow by Kahneman. And it's the two ways of reacting to the same issue, to the same input. I think that is very important.
That's very powerful, thinking fast and slow. Yep. I'll have to check that. I haven't come across it.
You can react to something in a very impulsive way.
Yeah.
And that's your system one. But then there's a system two, which is the more rational, the more, let me think about it. Which, by the way, also, and by the way, I'm really making this, just simplifying the message. Kahneman would probably kill me. But it also speaks to when you hear something, wait 10 seconds before reacting.
Yeah.
It might make you get to a different reaction.
That's a big one, because I always say to my guys, or even my children, I say, when there's a problem, physically, figuratively, take a step back, look at it. If it's a really big decision, sleep on it, right? They say in Asia, always make a decision on a full stomach, not on an empty stomach. But with intermittent fasting, I think that's probably changed a little bit now. What about, because the thing I feel that is a little bit of a shame is that I feel not everyone puts the work in. And I think it doesn't matter if you're a sports person, an investor, you've got to put the work in. Talking of which, you're in such a high profile role. How do you keep that balance in terms of, being physically fit and capable because you're on the plane the whole time, performing at an optimum? How do you go about keeping that balance in check?
Actually, this is a conversation I often have with many of my younger team members who start traveling, whether to meet with companies or to meet with clients. And I tell them to think about themselves as if they were athletes. Food, good food, regular food. Don't just grab a sandwich running around. Make a point that you have that half an hour for lunch, even also just to think and to kind of reconnect with yourself. Sleep well. Make sure you sleep well. You sleep, sufficient hours even when you're on the road. And then make sure you have those little routines. You wake up and you have your cup of coffee. You go to sleep and, I have my tea before I go to sleep. And then last but not least, sport. Make sure you exercise. Whatever you like doing, even if it's just a quick walk before you go to your meetings in the morning, even if that means, you might get out there, it's still dark, just do some form of exercise. It really keeps your mind healthy.
I think walking's so underrated. I think it's brilliant because you don't need that much recovery. And if you're lucky and it's a nice day, you get some time outside. What do you do? Because I know you told me that you enjoy doing things like skiing, but probably can't do that every day, especially in London. But what do you do on a daily basis?
I try to be outdoors as much as I can, and I am not able to do it on a daily basis. But if I'm traveling, for example, I'll at least go for a run. And if the weather doesn't permit, or the location doesn't permit, I'll be on a treadmill. If there is anywhere that I can find a swimming pool, I'll go for a swim.
Fantastic.
Or if anything else, I'll just go for a walk. And, I'll listen to my news. So I'm still working, I'm still listening, or I'll be on meetings. But it still keeps my body moving.
I think we're lucky now because people are more health conscious, because in the old days, and I'm only talking about a few years ago, if you went out for a client dinner or what have you, the assumption would be you're going to drink alcohol, you're going to have a big dessert, and it just takes its toll, right? Yep. It takes a while to recalibrate. So that's good that that's over. In terms of when you're unwinding, because I get the sense that you're so passionate about what you do, like my wife's a workaholic. There's me, her, and a laptop in the relationship. I'm guessing you're a little bit similar to that. But what do you do to actually switch off?
Sports.
Okay.
Sports is the way I will do it. And there is actually one sport that really makes me switch off, and that's skiing.
Okay.
And that's because you've got to think of where you're going, otherwise you can get very hurt.
Yeah.
And that keeps me on my toes. And I think of nothing else but, making sure that I do what I'm doing well.
Well, I'm curious because when we spoke, I was so surprised about when you told me where your family home is, your residence.
Yes.
How did you fall in love with it, that area?
So actually, my home is in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole, and I gradually moved away from the East Coast and moved to the Rockies. And that's because
this was years ago, right?
This was years ago. I mean, I started going there 25 years ago, and when I started working, I started making some money. I wanted to do the things that I'd never done and never had a chance to do. It was like scuba diving and tennis, but I'm really bad at tennis, so let's forget that one. Skiing, and I just grew this passion for skiing. And one of the first places I went to learn was Jackson Hole. And for any of the listeners who have skied there, that is not a beginner's mountain.
Yeah.
But I just fell in love with it. And so progressively, as work from home and, just remote working would be possible, I thought, okay, I'm moving progressively more there. Obviously, having teams around the world, having the headquarters of M&G in London, that means that I spend a lot of time not at home.
Yeah.
But the grand plan is to retire there.
So when you fly in, will you fly via New York and then, where do you fly into Salt Lake and then drive, or into actually Jackson Hole itself?
Well, that's the beauty of it. And now there's so many hubs where you can take a flight that then will take you into Jackson Hole Airport.
Yeah. And it's a stunning, like most people listening to this might not have been, but it's a stunning airport.
It's beautiful. It's next to Yellowstone Park, the Grand Tetons National Park.
Stunning.
So it's an amazing area. You do not want to drive from Salt Lake City there in winter, because one of the reasons why the place is so well known for skiing is there is very deep powder snow.
Yes.
And you really don't want to get caught into that.
I told you when we first spoke was I took my 2 daughters to Wyoming this summer, and we had the privilege to stay on a ranch, and I just couldn't stop looking. Every time I was driving, I couldn't stop looking at the Grand Tetons because they're stunning, and we saw it's rare where you see full rainbows, and we saw a few, and I did so many different things with my girls, but staying on a ranch in Wyoming was special.
It's priceless. And by the way, if my neighbors ever viewed this podcast, they would hate me because they want all of that to be a secret.
Well, hey, listen, the thing is, again, for those that don't know, from the little research I did when I was there, where you live in pockets of it is where they say billionaires buy out millionaires. I mean, it's you can't just go and set up there. But I tell you what, though, the interesting thing that I found in Jackson Hole, I know that there are quite a few tourists that go there, but everyone was very friendly.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really friendly. And it was stunning. It was really stunning.
People, attitudes, friendliness really make that place so much greater.
Have you, I'm hoping you're going to say yes, but have you been to the rodeo there?
No, I have not.
Oh, no. You got to give it a go. It was different. I bought the cowboy hat. My kids said, Dad, you're the only, I'm half Chinese, but you're the only Chinese cowboy. And I said, I'm sure there are a couple of others.
Were there?
No, it was just me. It was just me. And what I find interesting is I didn't grow up with horses. And I was smiling and nodding when you said that, because I always wanted to try things, right? Scuba diving, getting my nautical license, so on and so forth. And when you don't have any money, you're not even thinking about it. And then as you get a little bit older, you start thinking, let me try this, let me do that. But will you go back for Christmas? I'm just curious.
Oh, yes. Every Christmas and New Year. That's the place I go to.
Beautiful.
I'll take some friends with me and my husband.
Yeah.
And, it's...
Do you have a favorite restaurant in town, or a couple?
I do, but I'm not going to say. I'm not going to say. But there's so many of them, and that's the other thing. We have friends who have places in France, and in the past, they always said, "You have the snow, we have the food."
Yeah.
But the food has improved so much that we now send pictures to them and say, "So, how about this?"
Yeah, and nice little eateries that I found, because we went to some of the more small, quaint gourmet places as well. Mm-hmm. We went to a couple of the big steakhouses, which I enjoyed, but I like the smaller ones, more boutique feeling. When you look at future trends, what are the biggest challenges you see on the horizon for asset management, and how do you think that the industry will have to adapt to those?
Markets are getting more idiosyncratic. If you even just look at the earnings of companies over the last few quarters, you had companies that were in the same sector, even with similar client exposure, that actually performed very differently. So the ability of management to actually, perform, to lead a company, the structure of a company, they become so much bigger and differentiating factors. So for investors, for asset managers to serve their clients properly, they really have to have a very deep knowledge of what they invest in. And in the past, you had firms that would probably just rely on third-party research, possibly smaller firms, and I'm sure there's still room for all of them. But the hurdle has become just so much higher to make sure that you really know what you invest in, that you keep on meeting your managements, that you are looking at, not only the company that you invest in, but at the competition around them. It is just becoming a bigger job than in the past.
It is. The landscape's changed. I'm curious, for people looking to follow in your footsteps, in particular aspiring women, what can you share with us, pearls of wisdom that will help them along their journey?
So, I feel now like I have a big responsibility to share some words of wisdom. Don't give up. Sometimes things get difficult, and just hang in there.
Yeah.
Because in the end, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
And then just understand that being different in our industry, and that's true for women, but it's true for many others who are not a, white, big, chest-beating alpha male.
Yeah.
With all due respect for chest-beating
guys.
alpha male. Just know that diversity is a gift, but it's also a responsibility.
Yeah.
You need to let your voice be heard, because actually your workplace is going to become a better workplace because of that. And sometimes it's not comfortable. Sometimes you're wondering, why am I going through this? But you know what? Make that effort, and it will open doors to others after you, and it will just make that workplace so much better. But always be respectful. Whenever you voice your opinion, voice it, but be respectful.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's interesting because the two heroes in my life have always been my mum and my wife. And my mum grew up during a time, she was the breadwinner for some time because my dad fell sick when I was a teenager. And she got a promotion one day, and her boss said, "You're only getting this promotion because you're a woman and that you're from a minority." And my mum said, "Thanks, it's only taken me 30 years of my career for that to work in my favor." And I'm, with two young daughters now, I look at how things are changing and, progressive. But I just find it, even when I came to Singapore, what I loved about Singapore was kind of like the US, one's ability to deliver, right? And if you've got a voice and you put your hand up and you ask to be heard, as long as you can deliver and you can get in the room. I think in the UK, I found it a little bit more difficult with the establishment. I think things have changed, remarkably so. But what I love about the US is that winners are celebrated, right? And it's okay to say that you want to win. You can be confident yet humble. And again, I think that's changing now. One of the things I learned in Singapore, it took me probably 7 or 8 years to learn in Singapore that yes was actually no. And I've tried to work it out, and it's almost like people don't want to be offensive and say no. Whereas in Hong Kong, I always say they'll kick you out the room. The no is a strong no. And so what I've learned in time is to bring no's forward. I'm just curious, as a leader, and as someone that has grown up and worked with so many different people in many different countries, what leadership qualities do you speak to that you think are really powerful for those aspiring managers?
You have to make sure that you have your team's back.
Yes.
That is so.
That resonates.
That is so important. And you need to be respectful. As asset managers, actually the most important asset we manage, besides obviously our clients' money, is our people. And you have to respect them. There is no excuse for not being respectful. And it doesn't matter if someone is senior, is junior, that becomes key. Because, by the way, the example you set is also how the team is going to run. Yeah. And you want them to run that way.
Your reputation is that, you are a leader that people want to follow, right, internally and externally. And what I've learned about great leaders, great friends, great people is they will defend you when you're not in the room. That takes a lot of courage. And, it's interesting. We were talking about a mutual friend earlier, and that person was telling me that nowadays with a 360 feedback, sometimes if you get negative feedback, how does that work? And it's sad, but I think more people are willing to say negative things than positive things. And you can do things 99 times right, and you mess up once. And it's not easy being a leader, right? It's not easy to go out there and charge the way, So, for example, I know a lot of people that feel they don't get a promotion and they presume their boss is not looking out for them, but they don't necessarily know what's happening behind closed doors. So it's not easy, right?
It is not easy. And I always tell my team, if they're dealing with someone else or maybe another senior manager, I always tell them, don't you worry, just put the blame on me. Because I'm okay, I'm here, I'll take the blame for whatever, and your life can be easier. It's part of my job.
Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover or touch upon?
Nothing else besides the fact it has been an incredible pleasure, Paul, and an incredible initiative to have these podcasts.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully, they will be enjoyed by many.
Well, you're so gracious, and we spoke for the first time on Friday, but I feel like I've known you for many years, so thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.